Welcome everyone to the video. Welcome to the channel. And today we're going to talk about the conflict in the Middle East. And I'm not going to necessarily call it a war, and a lot of people call it a war. But Congress is really has the authority to declare war. The president can definitely order military action, but Congress hasn't said it's a war. So I'm not going to call it a war. But with the Middle East, when does it end? It's a rhetorical question. Because if you zoom out far enough, the conflict in the Middle East just feels like an endless conflict all the time. We hear about war, we hear about peace talks, we hear about, presidents, not just United States presidents, promising stability in the Middle East. But the region has always seemed to sit at the center of just global tension. And it didn't start with oil, didn't start with the United States. It didn't start with Israel or Islam. It started since the beginning of civilization. And, some of the first civilizations emerged in that area in Mesopotamia. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, they formed these, city states. Um, they developed writing and they fought. Why? Over land, over water, food, security. Since the moment they were able to, set up a city and put up a fence or a wall or anything, that's it. And the land meant survival, control of resources, control of, food, crops, maybe control of a river. Look at the Egyptians, all their major cities were along the Nile. So controlling the Nile was very, very important to them. And in that Middle East region as well, too, there's a lot of desert, a lot of dry areas. So controlling, natural sources of water was very, very important. And if you control those, you control life. We fast forward thousands of years and, replace the water with oil, the canals with pipelines, replace the caravans with shipping lanes, the resource changes. But human nature doesn't change. Um, one thing that the Middle East has always, why it's always mattered is because of movement. Think of the Silk Road, the connection between Asia and Europe, the incense route that connected Arabia to the Mediterranean. They had goods moving even back then, We think of nowadays, all the stuff we get in, but it's important to us. And it was important to them as well, too. Moving goods around, not just moving goods, but knowledge, ideas, and obviously moving your armies around. And whoever controlled those crossroads really controlled the wealth. I forget the name of that one civilization that had built a lot of their temples and stuff into the rock faith. They were incredibly wealthy because they basically charged a tax for, crossing through there. You think of it like, a bridge toll is what they did. And that hasn't changed. Today it's, shipping lanes, um, energy corridors. You start to disrupt those things, and the world economy starts to feel it. And that region has always been strategically central. Kind of thirsty today. But it's not just just for resources as well too. It's also a sacred ground to many religions. Jerusalem sits at the heart of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I mean, Babylon was a huge, huge holy land in its era. And A lot of people fought over it, fought over control of it. It was once its own, imperial power. But then, even after it fell, it was still a place of religious importance for the people of that time. And when the land becomes holy, compromise becomes, spiritual surrender. And, you can negotiate over trade, but it, it's harder to negotiate over a covenant. And when multiple faiths see the same land as divinely significant, the stakes just rise beyond just economics. And it just continues to add fuel to an already strategic fire. So, these are all that you think of the oil, you think of, its importance as far as, where it is ge- geographically, the all, major religions of the world are all focused on it. So it can become a very, you know, uh, that's why people will start fighting over this area. Um, and like I said earlier, we've seen multiple US presidents talk about peace in the Middle East. I've heard it my whole life. They've come up with different strategies. I don't know how many speeches I've heard. The same promise, and yet peace always seems very, very fragile. Um, Peace isn't just a document. It's history, identity, power, security, fear, and no outside power can erase thousands of years of layered complexity. It, you know, it's it. Well, let me continue here with what my thoughts here. Um, what do I believe? My own, opinions now, about what's going on. I don't like war any more than anybody else. War means loss of life. Families. I've heard. I don't know. I think of several U.S. Service men or women were recently killed. Families become shattered. I wish agreements could be, could replace battles, but the world we live in, it just doesn't always cooperate with that wish. I mentioned this many, many times that I want to be a part of the strongest nation on this earth. And not because I crave anything like domination or anything like that. But because weakness invites pressure. Uh, to look Take a look back in history, many compare the United States to Rome or Greece, but I really, really think it's a lot closer to Carthage, if you're familiar. Carthage was a merchant empire. They were built on trade. They also had a very dominant naval force as well too. They built strategic alliances. They would protect those alliances and protect their, the trade that they had established. Um, like I said, they built one of the strongest navies, one of the strongest militaries. Hannibal, one of the great generals, comes from Carthage. They defended their partnerships and they expanded their influence. And I say that, but they conquered as well too. So I'm not going to take away from that. They did go out there and conquer other peoples to increase their wealth. I'm not going to just not even mention that, but it did happen. They did flex their muscle when it was required. What happened to Carthage and why, it's not very widely known is they ran into Rome. They did trade with Rome in the beginning, but Rome was becoming a military superpower. And they fought in three wars. They were called the Punic Wars. Uh, and Rome didn't just, when Rome, they fought them once, they won. they won all three wars. Okay. And then by the final war, they wanted to erase Carthage off the face of the earth, is what they were going to do. And they pretty much did that. But, and I definitely believe that uh, to maintain strength, a nation sometimes has to show strength. Deterrence only works if others believe that you will act. Um, but here's the tension is how much is enough? At what point does deterrence become provocation? Did I pronounce that right? Provocation. Um, I'm not very good at pronunciation. English was not my strong subject, so I always had to work very hard at it. I did get straight A's, to toot my own horn, but I had to work very hard in English. I was better at math and science and um, went to school for engineering. Uh, where am I at here? Uh, I'm looking at my notes here, right here. Uh, so ultimately it boils down to what everything boils down to is human nature. We're all tribal. We all want security. We all want an advantage, and we fear vulnerability. Um, I really, really feel like, and if we zoom out a lot further, that this is a lot bigger than just the Middle East. Um, I think it's about superpowers, and the superpowers being United States, us, or I should say, what I'm a part of. I don't know who's watching. The United States, China, and Russia. The military action, whatever economic sanctions are going on, building alliances, whatever regional influence we're trying to impose. It may all look like, preparation for some sort of a strike. I've been seeing on social media everywhere, everyone's talking about World War III, World War III. I know a lot of people are joking about it, but a lot of people are like World War III, here it's coming. That's it. This is the start. This is what the end time said. Um, but maybe it's just a positioning. It's a positioning. Uh, Everyone's positioning itself for prevention. Uh, because everyone, I think, understands what total dominance today would come at a catastrophic cost. Not just I think nuclear devastation. We're all aware that all these different superpowers have nuclear capability as far as weapons go. I definitely don't think it would reach that point, but I'm more thinking of the economic collapse of you know global instability is more what I'm thinking towards. Uh-oh, my lights turned off. Hold on one second. Okay, my lights are back. I forgot they were on a timer. Um, but like I said, I was thinking more, economic collapse, global instability. We're all rivals, but we are all economically intertwined, more so with China than with Russia. And destroying the other would just damage yourself. It's kind of like how does it go? Like, how much are you willing to? How does that cliche go? How much are you willing to lose? Or I can't think of the cliche right now. Um, so it's like a chessboard basically, and the board stays tense. Pieces are moving, but the final strike always remains in the realm of potential. Because the cost of an actual strike, the cost of actually, you know, moving your pieces and striking on the chessboard, the cost is just too great. But when does this all end? I don't think it does. I think it's always going to be this positioning. Uh, I don't. Maybe it doesn't. It just doesn't end. And maybe it's all. It's the human condition. You know, competition without total annihilation, strength without without constant war. Positioning without pressing for the final move. Such is life. I think the question isn't whether tension exists. The question is whether we can manage it without destroying ourselves. History always shows conflict, but it also shows restraint as well too. And maybe in our era, the restraint, born out of fear of mutual destruction is what keeps the world from repeating history, repeating all these, Rome's collapse, Carthage's collapse, the Persian collapse. Time will tell eventually how things play out. Hopefully, this, this doesn't last too long, and we'll see. And like I've always said, I want to be a part of the best, strongest, greatest nation. I definitely, I'm here in the United States. If you haven't guessed, I'm here in the United States, and you know, I always will, at least as far as I can see, will be a United States citizen. Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed the episode. Let me know down in the comments what you think, your thoughts, your feelings, and I'll see you in the next one.